Welcome everybody. Good day. Blessings to all of you. Yeah, it's beautiful to be here. Okay, so we have a retreat coming up in Sedona, April 3rd through the 6th. There's a couple of non-residential spots that are open. So if you shoot me an email, I'll give you the details for that. And in addition to that, we have our next in-person retreat after that is Kripalu, July 13th through the 18th. And these are both 2025. I'll put a online retreat on the books sometime into May or beginning of June. Okay. So what I'd like to speak about today are the big no-nos on the path of Kundalini awakening. And it's been a while since I've spoken about these, but I thought I'd just share a list. And I want to open it up for some group participation here. So in the chat, you can just, write some little things that have not worked for you, and I'll see, I'll add them to the list. So one of the things that happens when we have this freight train of Shakti awake and flowing through our body is, well, it overwhelms our nervous system. And from a human perspective, we might look at this Kundalini and say, oh, this is too much, and this is bad, this is wrong, this shouldn't be happening. But the bottom line is we are spiritual beings, we're on a spiritual path, and we are in a spiritual world. This is God's world, and we need to learn how to cooperate with the divine. And so when we have this intensity of energy of light that's flowing through us, it's very important that we don't add to the intensity. And so the first big no-no is we'll say no to stimulants. And whether that's coffee and whether that's, drinking Coca-Cola all day or drinking energy drinks, if, anyone here does that type of thing. But stimulants tend to really mess people up. It just tends to pour gas on the fire. Now, people get really upset, if I say, hey, coffee's not good for you. They think I'm trying to take away, something that they really need. But just big picture, long term, stimulants aren't the best thing when we have Kundalini Shakti. And so if you can manage coffee, beautiful. Most of us, if we drink coffee and have, Kundalini, that's probably going to be too much for our nervous system to handle. We might, have lots and lots of sleepless nights. Okay, so stimulants of any kind, whether that's drugs, whether it's, caffeine, these types of things tend to mess up the system. The second one is forced practices. So practices where we force the energy, where we're trying to direct it in a forceful way, tend to really invigorate the energy. And again, it's like pouring gas on the fire. So any time of intense pranayama, we want to avoid. If we're practicing yoga for 3 hours a day and doing a really intense Ashtanga practice for multiple hours a day, that can mess a lot of people up. Light, gentle yoga, no big deal. Of course, that's helpful. But forced practices, especially pranayama, is overwhelming. Also, psychedelics can really be overwhelming. The bigger psychedelics like ayahuasca, LSD, a heroic dose of mushrooms, these types of things can be absolutely overwhelming and can just open all the doors of the psyche at once. And then, then we often have too much Kundalini Shakti flowing. So of course that could be a problem. A light, gentle use of psychedelics, like sometimes microdosing, can be actually very helpful in helping to slowly open some of the resistant egoic doors. But some people, they have, intense Kundalini and depression, and then they fly to Peru and do 10 nights of ayahuasca. And then, they wonder why they can't sleep for the next 2 years. And it's no wonder. Also in the realm of stimulants is, if we're just receiving too much from the internet and whether that be just being lost, for too long on the internet, whether that's, on Twitter and arguing politics, or, on Instagram fighting with people, or sometimes it's just, we're spacing out, but we're ingesting too much, TikTok and this type of, energy, or Instagram energy, where we're receiving, whether it's violent energy or, dopamine hits or whatever it is, and then spacing out at the same time. That tends to really aggravate the nervous system and, in a sense, aggravate the Kundalini. This is a fun one. Getting angry or having intense emotions. Often that can be healing and cathartic, just to allow intense emotions to flow. But there's been times that, if you have all this Kundalini flowing through your system, the Kundalini can be like rocket fuel for whatever you're experiencing. So if you just have a little bout of anger towards your father or mother or sister or brother, and you have Kundalini in your system, that little bit of anger might turn into explosive rage that doesn't calm down. And, that can be something that can just be really, really overwhelming. This also happens in an interesting way with addictions, and even with something like gossiping. Like sometimes you might find, okay, you're having a thought about, somebody, and, you're about to gossip, but maybe you have a moment of mindfulness and you're like, oh no, I shouldn't say that. But then, you say it anyways, and you open that throat chakra, and then the Kundalini gets behind the gossip. Not because Kundalini wants you to gossip, but Kundalini, in one sense, is very personal, but in another sense, it can just be like an impersonal fuel, fueling whatever's present. And so if you have a tendency to gossip, you might find yourself opening your mouth, and 3 hours later, we're still gossiping. We've gossiped about our neighbor and our father, mother, sister, brother, all of our exes. And now we're gossiping about the king or the queen or whoever, the royal court. I don't even know if there's a king right now. But anyways, I'm not British. But, that might be a thing that you're just like, why? Like, why does my neurosis, go on overdrive? And sometimes Kundalini just brings it all to the surface. But if we have a mindfulness about, what to allow forward and what not to allow forward, sometimes we can really save ourself by biting our tongue. The whole realm in regards to no-nos, like the whole realm of addictions, tends to be troublesome. What addictions often do is, like, we have this Kundalini that wants to flow right through the central channel, through all 7 chakra centers, up and out the top of the head. But with addictions, it's almost like the energy begins to flow up, and then it will flow out the side. So if we're addicted, again, to drugs and alcohol, or trying to use some polite words here, lustful imagery on the internet, or, these types of things, again, political arguing, if we hang out at the bar, or, gamble and these types of things, like sometimes the Kundalini will get behind that in an impersonal way and can really spin the neurotic component of our neurosis. And, this can be really, really difficult to manage when we have all the Kundalini Shakti, flowing into our addictive cycles. And so it's very important to live a pure life. And I'm not saying that from a moralistic perspective, but a life that is in alignment with truth. A life that's in alignment with truth. And so for most of us, again, if we just do the opposite of everything I've said so far, we have a simple life. We get up, we meditate, light, gentle meditation, light, gentle yoga. We eat a good, healthy diet. We're not having big, explosive emotions. We have our addictions, boundaried or in check, or we do our healing work in this regard, so the addiction doesn't even exist. This is the type of life that's going to be healing for us. and supportive for the flowing and the integration of Kundalini Shakti. Um, Another thing I'll say is if we have intense judgments and criticism, I've worked with countless individuals who have like a little bit of criticism, a little bit of judgment in their mind, and then the Kundalini gets behind it. Again, not because the Kundalini wants you to judge yourself, but it's like the Kundalini is, in one sense, is just pure fuel. So if you pour fuel on the fire of judgment, you might find yourself, I've met with a lot of people who physically hit themselves in the face. They judge themselves, they look in the mirror and they say these violent, aggressive things. And they say that's the Kundalini talking. It's like, no, that's not the Kundalini talking. That's not the Kundalini talking. Just like gasoline or petrol for you Europeans, if I said that correctly, doesn't, doesn't have an opinion, doesn't have a belief. But petrol, gasoline will fuel any car, any vehicle that it's in. And so if this petrol of Kundalini fuels, negativity in our mind, a lot of people say, oh, the Kundalini is making me do this. It's not the case. It's the inner critic is infused with all this energy. And if that's the case, we need to do our healing work around the inner critic, the inner judge, the inner abuser, for some folks. And so it's important that our mind is clear and empty and free, Christ-like, compassionate, like the Buddha, and not just full of, old repressed anger or the voice of our disgruntled mother or grandmother. Um, yeah, and so Cal writes, something funny about caffeine. He says he's been on caffeine for 15 years and he can't even tolerate, decaf at 0.2% caffeine. Yeah. And that's a common thing. Now, some people, their bodies just seem to be wired for caffeine and they can pull it off, but mine's not. I can't have a drop of caffeine or alcohol and it just messes me up. Just messes me up. Sometimes if I get the moon just right, I can have a cup of decaf or, a half calf, just a teeny little bit if I'm driving 18 hours across country and if I do it first thing in the morning. So let's hear some more from you. Like, please drop some more in the chat. So anything that's impure in our life is going to end up being disastrous. So a life at bars, a life of gossip, a life of addiction, a life of just being, addicted to dopamine on the internet. These things are going to be really, really difficult. Another fun one is sometimes people have a tendency to overwork, and often with Kundalini, the state of overworking can lead to a state of chronic anxiety and even states of just exhaustion and crashing. And so it's very important that we put our work life in check. We have our relationship life in check. So we certainly, can't do highly volatile, dramatic, chaotic relationships. I've met individuals who've had Kundalini Shakti and who are in dramatic relationships, and the police are always being called. And, it's just like they're breaking up and getting back together, back and forth and just creating crazy in their life. And, I can't tell you how many people I've met who've been on this path of Kundalini awakening who end up, ending their relationship just because it's not healthy and it's too much to handle, a toxic relationship and Kundalini Shakti. Oh yeah, this is a fun one. Lifting weights in an attempt to ground the energy was like throwing petrol on the fire for me. It made my Kundalini really angry and I thought my head was going to explode. Yeah, there's an interesting correlation. This will sound silly, but around lifting weights and also sexual activity, in the sense that in our spine, if we're lifting weights and we're doing a lot of like pumping and heaving and contracting and these types of movements. And again, any of us can imagine that, in regards to, physical intimacy with a partner. Like if we're doing a lot of that type of thing, like sometimes just that opening and closing, like the pumping, the taking deep breaths and, and this kind of stuff with weightlifting, or physical intimacy can really just mess up the flow of Kundalini Shakti. And plumbers know this, that sometimes if you get air in a water line, that air just like screws up the flow of water. And then the water just starts like coming out in these big bursts and explosiveness. And the similar kind of thing can happen in the realm of, the subtle energetic body. And, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to lift weights to ground. And sometimes if you do light, gentle weights, it's no big deal. If we do heavier weights where we're doing this kind of pumping and contracting kind of activity, it can be absolutely disastrous. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, Yvonne brings forward a beautiful one. Sometimes energy work, if it's light and gentle, is so healing. Other times on the path, as soon as anyone puts their hands on you, whether it's a healer or, maybe even your child, it's like, oh my God, you might be bouncing off the table. And so sometimes, these things, the body just can't handle them. They can't handle any additional input, energetic input. There was a period of time, it was heartbreaking for me, but a period of time when my own children couldn't touch me. Like no one could touch me because I would just shake and have energetic seizures. It was hilarious from one perspective, deeply heartbreaking from another. Um, Anne writes, medical procedures, burns, injuries to the skin. Yeah, this can be really difficult, really difficult. Sometimes the subtle energetic body becomes very sensitive. And even to turn that up a notch, being poked and prodded at the doctor sometimes is a big no-no. But normally if you're at the doctor, you're there for a reason. Um, but getting hit in the head, getting slapped around, these types of things, any type of shocks to the body or trauma, car accidents, a lot of these are unavoidable. But when we have lots of Kundalini, it's not the best time to go to boxing class. It's not a great time to be playing football or rugby. It's not a great time to be bouncing a soccer ball or a football if you're European on your heads. It's just the head and the central nervous system, the spine tends to be very, very sensitive. And we want to treat the body like it's a baby, light, gentle, and serene. Um, when we're having Kundalini Shakti, not a good time to be getting allergy shots or filling the body with a bunch of vaccines and these types of things. It's just like the body doesn't want to be overly stimulated, doesn't want to be given poisons, doesn't want to be given anything extra. For most people on the path, we have to take everything off the plate, everything off the plate, and strip ourselves down to just like bare bones and live in a state of relaxation and peace for a number of years to allow this freight train of Kundalini Shakti to integrate. Okay. I'm going to invite us now just to gently close our eyes, and we'll just shift gears and have a little bit of meditation here before we move into sharing. And so there was a lot said, a lot of information. And right now we can put all the information on the back burner and let us just take some deep, full breaths, breathing deeply and fully all the way down to the pelvic floor. Deep, full inhale. And deep, full exhales. Inviting our subtle energetic body to unplug from the world, from the chaos of life. Unplugging from any sense of busyness, whether that's working or overworking, or job, career, vocation, parenting. Sometimes we get a little too pushy with trying to heal. And right now, in this moment, let us open to this primal sense of peace, which is always already here. Opening the consciousness of Shiva. There's space, there's peace. And inviting the central nervous system to plug back in just to a natural, primal, essential state of peace. Inviting the body to be restored to harmony and balance. Inviting the chakras to open so that there is a clear path, a clear channel for Kundalini Shakti to flow. Breathing, feeling. Softening and opening. And taking a moment to listen to your body, to listen to the Kundalini Shakti, and see if this Kundalini has a message for you, to see if your body has a message for you. Something that needs to be surrendered, or released. Something that needs to be taken off your plate. Or moved to the back burner. Sometimes when we're on this spiritual path, we get overly excited about healing everything in our life all at once. Sometimes it's too much, and we need to take, our relationship with our father, mother, sister, brother. We need to take it off our plate. Sometimes we care too much about our ex, or what they're doing, or what they're up to, or should I stay or should I go? And just giving ourselves permission to take whatever it is that's untrue off of your plate. giving it back to God, giving it back to life. Some of us have little or big addictions, and it's time to let go of these things. Sometimes we look for love or healing outside of ourselves. Again, it's time to let go of these things. For some of us, we compulsively judge ourselves for things that we've done or things we did in the past or decisions we made. Now is a time for forgiveness, for letting go, for surrender. And so we're breathing, feeling, softening and opening. Inviting great love, great peace, great truth and healing to restore our body, our mind, our soul to balance, and in turn to invite, invoke a state of harmony, state of integration. Our physical body, this massive movement of Kundalini Shakti. So seeing the Kundalini flowing right through the center, unencumbered, uninhibited, is flowing on the superhighway right through the central channel, flowing up through the root, through the hara, solar plexus, through the heart, through the throat, through the third eye, out the top of the head, and then pouring down all around you, collecting in a pool and flowing up again. So inviting this gentle flow of the microcosmic orbit, energy flowing up right through the center of the spine, flowing out the top of the head, flowing into heaven, and raining down, collecting in a pool at the base, and flowing up again, unencumbered, flowing with ease, with peace, fluidity, restoring harmony and balance. Harmony and balance. We breathe, we feel, we soften, we open. We surrender all thought, all limiting beliefs, all addictions, all toxic relationships, all stimulants, anything we've learned on the path that's unhelpful, anything the Kundalini reminds us of, we let it go. We let it go. We bring our life into harmony and balance with God's will and our highest will, our highest manifestation. Breathing, feeling, softening, and trusting. Trusting. This deep space of surrender. This deep space of freedom and flow. And so, now we'll move into the sharing section of the program. So please come forward and share of yourself. And if you're listening at a later date, you can share in the comments. But I want you to share what your experience is, what the Kundalini told you that maybe you need to let go of, or maybe what you need more of in your life.